Just wanted to start off on behalf of the Ohio State football program. Want to express our sadness and our prayers to the entire University of Virginia, its football program, over the senseless killings that took place over this past weekend. Our prayers to the families and friends, certainly who have lost loved ones. It's tragic, senseless, and it pains me to understand why something like this would happen. And so our thoughts are with everyone there in Charlottesville.
Coach, thank you. Yep. We'll open up the floor today for questions. Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Seems trite to ask you about football now.
No, I know.
Josh Pryor receiving his first start. How did he grade out at right tackle? And just how do you feel like the offensive line overall is playing through 10 games now?
Josh graded out a champion. Played well. When you play a full game, you get a real good feel for where you're at, and his preparation leading up to that game. When you're a backup coming off of the injury last year too, he was growing and building. The good thing for him is he was getting in games at times in our Bison package, but he graded out a champion, played well. A lot of plays he's got to get better at, but I thought we took a step in the right direction on Saturday with the offensive line.
Right behind him, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Just come with some of the backstory behind the block punt.
Yeah. So every week we have a couple block punts that we work on, and then based on what we're seeing, we make adjustments in game. Lathan's been working hard. We have about 5 guys that we work at the punt blocks from different angles and different schemes. Lathan's one of those guys that's put a lot of work in, and what we do on Thursdays is we put on, in baseball, when those guys put on those gloves with the metal piece there to save them from jamming their wrist or breaking their hand when they slide into second base. We do the same thing. Josh Proctor in 2019 went to do the same thing and broke his hand. I said, that's it. We're not going to do that again. So we had to figure out a way to block punts without putting our hands and fingers at risk. So that's what he wears. He wears the gloves. And that's what our guys do. And so over and over again, he puts the gloves on, and we talk about putting the gloves on and then working on the technique of blocking a punt. In game, we saw some things on the sideline, and Parker made a great adjustment. Said this is how we're going to do it. Not exactly the way we practiced it during the week, but Lathan was able to put that on the field, and then obviously that was kind of a turning point in the game. I think that kind of helped us pull away.
Given some of the issues, the muff punch you've had over the last couple of weeks, has there been conversations to maybe try that more often?
We try. And there's certain times where, based on what they're doing, it's better to return it. And there's other times where you want to go after it. Now, when you go after it, there's a risk that goes with that. You bump into the punter. It's a first down and 15 yards, and that can be a momentum swing as well. So there's give and take there. We have gone after some, and they just the blocking scheme just didn't quite work out that way. There's a lot more challenges with the new style of the rugby punters with the shield, as opposed to maybe like 10 years ago. You saw more of the pro style where those guys would kick slide, and it was more of a in the pocket punt. Guys nowadays with the Australian rules punters, they can really be creative about where they go, and it becomes a different and probably more difficult challenge to block punts.
Right behind him, Dan Holt, 11 Warriors.
Ryan, you said after the game Saturday that Xavier hadn't been practicing much at running back. Is that something that he will do more going forward after playing the way he did Saturday?
Yeah, he's done both in his career. He had been practicing more at receiver recently, but he's done a lot at running back as well. He's spent really the first couple of years at running back, and so you could see his running skills. I mean, he jumped right in, and it wasn't like we had to spend a ton of time with him on the tracks. He's got plenty of experience doing that, and we always kind of felt like he was more of a running back than he was a receiver, and then he's blossomed as a receiver as well. So him being able to provide depth right there has been huge, and he's done really good things when the ball's been in his hands.
What do you think it is about him that enables him to go back and forth between positions so successfully?
I think it's because he learned, coming through special teams, all the different ways to play football. You just learn so much playing all 4 phases. And he's done that, and he's embraced it. You're playing out in space on kickoff return. You're learning how to avoid blocks. You're learning how to block people. You're learning how to catch the ball. When he's the kickoff return guy, he's done some punt return work in practice. There's just so many different things and skills that you learn playing special teams, and that's translated to him being productive on the field.
Fourth row middle, Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Brian, you
said competitive excellence probably as much as anything this year, and you
Yep.
guys have obviously done that well. You've got a game this weekend, but there's the big one coming in 2 weeks. How do you guys keep attention on Maryland, make sure no one's looking ahead to get to where you want to go before that game?
I think it's something that comes up every week. It comes up every year, this time of year. So what we try to do is like you said, the competitive excellence focus is something that we talked about early on, so that when we got to a moment like this, you don't just walk in a Tuesday meeting and say, guys, okay, we got to really focus on this week. Well, we've been saying this all along. And, March Madness starts the first week of the season around here. And so you just have to embrace that and understand what it means to bring it every single week. Now we're working, the game at the end of the year, every day out of the year. So that's not something that is out of the ordinary to know that that's always in the back of our minds, but that's like that every week. So our focus right now is on Maryland, going down there at 3:30, playing really good football, and then going from there.
Fourth row right, Cameron T. Robinson, The Athletic.
Ryan, kind of to expand on that, you mentioned even last week that you guys prepare for the game at the end of the year all year long.
Right.
I know you're not sitting here watching Michigan film, so what goes into preparing for big games on a weekly basis for you guys?
Well, I just think it's a mindset. It's something that we've done in the off season. We do all along. But right now, again, the focus has to be on how we play on Saturday, and that's building towards the end of the year and playing our best football in November, because we know we have to play our best. We have an opportunity to go 11-0 this weekend and still not have reached one of our goals yet. It's just sobering, but it's the facts. So we know that, and it's part of that building process, week in and week out, to be playing our best football in November, and that's what we focus on. And so we got a really good opponent here in Maryland. They've played some teams really well this year. And you look at the teams that they played and the scores and what they've done. Mike's done a good job of recruiting some really good athletes there. I think Taulia is a very talented quarterback. They have some weapons on the outside. And they've played good on defense. I think they're stout over there, and they've played well this season. So, we've been in battles with these guys before. We've been in the same situation in 2018. And, that game went into overtime. So, Mike does a really good job, and we're going to have to play really well.
On Harris, what about him allows him to juggle so many things between work, school, and his foundation and still do it well? I
think it's the balance that he found growing up. His mom, Monica, certainly had a big part in all of that, in making sure that he understood that football is something that he does. It's not who he is, and that balance is become more important now, I feel like, than ever before, with the exposure our players get and everything that comes with it. That balance is very, very important, because at some point football does end, and when it does, you have to find that balance in your life. And I think Paris found that at a young age.
Right next door, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row, on 3.
Ryan, Ty Hamilton played more run defense snaps against Northwestern, and then played more pass defense snaps against in your last game against Indiana. What do you guys like about him on the inside, and have you seen him take a step forward? I think he had the second most snaps in the defense.
Yeah, no, I think he's playing his best football by far. I think you guys have seen it, graded out a champion. And I think you're seeing versatility there. I think you're seeing, like you said, strong against the run, powerful against the run, but also transitioning into the pass rush and pushing the pocket. Ty's gotten better every day. He works every day. He's there every day. And, we think he's playing at a starter level.
Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette, third row right.
Was Dallin Hayden somebody in the summer that you looked at and said, that guy could play for us right now? Or did that just kind of happen naturally as the season progressed and as you had to put him in there? I guess, how is his development? Has that surprised you at all, or did you see that guy as somebody who could contribute?
The talent was there. It's a matter of how quickly can they assimilate, how quickly can they get into the program and the culture, and then can they sustain over an extended period of time with all of the things that we ask of them, academically, in the weight room, the preparation, just the daily grind of being a college football player as a freshman. That's really what you're not sure about a young player. And then sometimes, it takes a little bit longer for them to get on the field. For Dallin, he's been able to, when he's get on the field, first of all, he's taking care of the ball. It's the number one job as a running back. And then from there, he's been able to go play and not let the moment be too big for him. I think when you watch him run, he runs with good vision. He runs with, he's got good quickness, good feet in the hole. accelerates through the hole. And I think that when I watch him, I think the best thing he's doing is just trusting his instincts and going out and play and not letting the moment get too big for him. So if he can keep building on that and growing on that, he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Right next door, Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, you got pretty good depth at wide receiver. I don't think there's a lot of people that would have said if you lose Jackson, that you wouldn't miss a beat. How important is that, the reputation of that room in recruiting and what you've established here to be able to say whatever wide receiver you or whatever it may be?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you had said to me that was going to happen this year, I wouldn't have believed you, But here we are, and that's football. You have to overcome these types of things, and that's where depth becomes critically important. And understanding that when you come here to play. When you play, that's kind of up to you, and how fast can you get on the field, and how quickly can you get a starter level. But you're going to have great opportunity, and our guys have taken that opportunity and run with it. But I think you can see the development, you can see the blueprint. You can see, how we do things schematically, fundamentally, the way Brian teaches. And so it's an exciting time to be a wide receiver at Ohio State.
Follow up, that said, what would Jackson give you right now? I mean, there are people who say, well, you haven't missed anything, you don't really need him, but what would he add to what the offense is?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say now that we've played 10 games and not really had him available. But listen, Jackson, is one of the best receivers in the country, one of the best, slot receivers I've ever been around. So, he's been missed.
What's his status, if you can just follow up on that?
Yeah, no update at this point. Yeah.
Second row, right, Doug Lesmerises, Cleveland.com.
Ryan, you mentioned after the game that maybe you've been a little stubborn, is the word you used, in terms of trying to run the ball in short yardage. There's been sort of this toughness conversation this whole year that you guys have embraced, and you want to be that tough football team. Is short yardage like the way that best manifests itself, or what are the ways that any football team, like actually on the field in moments, shows toughness in your mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just physicality, how hard you play. We say relentless effort is 4 to 6 A to B plus 2, 4 to 6 seconds the length of a play, point A to point B, and then for 2 seconds past the cone or past the whistle, 2 steps past the cone. I think that's a big thing. Can you play with unbelievable effort week in and week out as hard as you possibly can? That's the first thing. And the second thing is really just the physicality of actually looking someone in the eye and knocking them back. There was a lot of great instances of great toughness. I look at Xavier Johnson's run. I mean, there were guys running 70 yards down the field, getting, blocks where they're knocking people to the ground. And I mean, there was like 3 of them downfield. Unbelievable effort. There was some really good clips in here that we show in the champions meeting. I think we had about 14 clips of just relentless effort, toughness, discipline, guys playing really hard. Some unbelievable clips on special teams of just guys laying out, knocking people over. So I think all those things lead to that. Now you got to bring it every week, but those are the things. In terms of the short yardage, I mean that can be a part of it. You got to get movement. You got to run a guy over. You got to be physical, and we split the big one for on 3rd and 1 for the touchdown. That was great, but then there was some other ones that we got to do a better job of.
Right next door, Bill Landis, Rivals.
I guess maybe following up on that idea, Ryan, I think I might express this wrong, but I feel like sometimes you're in games where the margins can get so wide that maybe you have a luxury to kind of work through stuff during a game that other teams maybe don't have sometimes. Does that ever creep up in those situations where you're trying to cultivate something, you're trying to get good work in game situations in short yardage, where maybe if the situations were different, you wouldn't, as you said on Saturday, try to bang your head up against the wall?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we have to get certain things done, and when you find yourself in certain games, and you got to do what's best for the future of where you're going, not always in that moment right there. There's the time and place for everything. So we got to get that done, and we're going to keep working at it. And there's been good progress made, but those situations aren't going away, and we're going to keep working at it.
What is your, overall philosophy on throwing the ball in those situations? I think some people look at that and say that's maybe a pretty aggressive mindset to throw it on 3rd and 1 when you can just kind of fall forward for a yard. But how do you balance the physicality you want with throwing the ball with the quarterback and receivers you have?
You know, when you look at those situations, you know, certainly running the ball, you have to at some point say, you know, we can run 1 yard. You know, and there's going to be a lot of guys in the box, and that's a mentality and a physicality. But there's been other times, and you guys have seen it, and 4th and 1 in the Rose Bowl, and we're shooting it down the field. So, you know, we're going to do what's best to win the game. But there's part of that mindset that, you know, we got to make a yard when it's, you know, 4th and 1.
Over here to the right, Adam King, WBNS.
You guys have 11 days until the big one here at the Shoe. What do you need to see at Maryland to know that this team is ready?
I mean, I don't think there's anything that we're going to say, you know, now we're ready to go play this game. We just got to keep doing what we're doing, keep preparing the way that we've prepared, play well, find a way to win the game, and then move on to that one.
You guys dealt with a lot of injuries this year. It seems like more than most seasons. How frustrating can that be at times for a team to kind of just having to keep change pieces? How ready is this team to just get back to full strength?
Yeah, I mean, it can be very frustrating for sure, but at the same time, it's part of the game, and you see it happening across the country week in and week out. We try to do everything we can to make sure they have everything they need to get back on the field or prevent themselves from getting injured. You know, the prevention is really through sports science, through monitoring and recovery, and then we have our sports medicine department that helps them once they have an injury to get back on the field. And those guys do an unbelievable job, and they work at it. And you know, there was a lot of guys that played in that game that, you know, were hurting. I mean, you know, you don't hear that because we don't really, you know, put it out there. But there was a handful of guys this time of year that were pushing through a lot of bumps and bruises and things like that because it's, you know, November in the Big Ten. That's how it goes. So, you know, we're working on healing up to get healthy, but we have the right mindset. And I think the way that you saw us play on Saturday, you can see that our guys are strong and they're persevering through it.
Right in front of him, Clay Hall, WSYX.
Ryan, you go back to 2018, and Jerry and Mike remind us in the notes, Haskins ran for 3 touchdowns that day. Were you calling those runs, or was that Urban who's in love with that quarterback run?
I think at that point of that season, that was a unique time. I think you remember there was a couple points in the season where we were really struggling just getting any kind of run game going. And, you know, there was a point where, you know, Dwayne scrambled and threw it down and actually got booed in Ohio Stadium for not, you know, running for a first down. And there was some hard feelings there for a couple weeks. And, you know, Dwayne got challenged to, you know, get involved with the run game. And he did in that game, played really tough. And that was his hometown, you know, and all his friends and family were there. And, you know, during his service, you know, this past year, you know, that game was brought up as like a huge game for him and there's maturity as a player. And boy, he played well in that game because that was, what was it, 52-51 back and forth. And what a strange game. But, you know, the message will be to our team this week. I mean, that was a wounded team that their head coach, I think, had been fired, and they still played us really, really well. And Maryland's always dangerous, especially there.
Right in front of him, Don Berry, WBNS.
Coach, you've said all year, it doesn't matter who you're playing, it's about what you guys do. With that said, this is the time of the year you want to be playing your best ball. Obviously, the big one's looming. How close are you to playing what you would consider your best ball, and what do you want to see better this week?
You know, I feel like if you say you're playing your best ball, that means you played your best ball last week and you can't get any better than it the next week, you know. So I think it's this constant build and growth towards maximizing yourself in all 3 phases. Do I think we've played our best football yet? No, I don't. I think that we can play better in all 3 phases, and we're going to have to go reach our goals. So this is a constant chase towards, you know, being the best version of ourselves. And every week, that's the goal, is just to get better. And how fast can we get better in certain areas? And I think I've shared with you the challenge sometimes is the issues are there. They may not get exposed every week, but you got to identify what those issues are, and that's the art of, you know, coaching.
With that said, we know what's down the road. Do you feel an intensity shift, especially this week?
Yeah, we'll see as the week goes on, but our guys know what our goals are. We talked about it at the mid-year. You know, we were 6-0 going in to the bye, and we said, you know, none of our goals have been met. I reminded the guys on Sunday, none of our goals have been met. They know what's on the table, but you know, in order to go reach our goals, we got to win this game too. You know, it's part of the game. You got to win them all. And so we'll keep that one in the back of our mind like we do every single day out of the year. But we're going to focus on beating Maryland on Saturday.
Far left, Justin Holbrook, WCMH.
When it comes to a true freshman, especially like Dallin or Travion last year, what's the balance between maturity and character and ability, and why those two things work simultaneously, and why they can work right away when they get here?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that the talent has to be there, because if you don't have the talent, then it's hard to keep up. It's hard to perform on the field. But if you don't have the maturity, like you said, the work ethic, the ability to process high levels of information, handle a brand new workload that you didn't have in high school, those add up real fast on you, especially this time of year. So, and then a lot of times guys hit a lull and they come back out of it. They struggle. Like that really happened to Chris Olave his freshman year, but he was struggling. He wanted to go back to California in the worst way. And a couple guys put their arms around him. He came out of it. And then remember the game he had at the end of the year. So, I don't know if Dallin got that, low at some point. You'd have to ask him. But every freshman goes through it. And then if you can come out the back end, then usually you're stronger for it. And, good to see him play the way he did on Saturday. I'm sure that's going to give me more confidence.
Second row left, Steve Hellwagen, 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, Coach, I don't suppose you're going to tell us if Travion Henderson and Mine Williams are ready to practice or whatever, but just from a general standpoint, given the uncertainty, you're going to play with a running back. Just how do you prepare for this game with the idea they may practice half the time, they may not practice or play at all? Just from a general standpoint, how do you guys go into the week at that position?
In a perfect world, everyone's healthy and everyone's practicing and getting all the physical reps that you would need in a game week. We have physical reps and mental reps. And so what you have to do is you have to really focus hard on, if you're not getting all the reps that you need in practice, being in the back and getting the mental rep, putting yourself in there, actually physically walking through that rep and seeing the picture, then going through watching the film and doing a lot of extra work on your own. That's why I give Xavier Johnson a lot of credit last week, because he didn't have all the physical reps, but he was able to put it on the field at a pretty high level when he was in there playing that position. So that'll be the challenge if those guys aren't able to physically practice as much.
Deep left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
Right, in a couple of years, we're going to be in a Big Ten with no divisions. And if that existed this year, you guys would already be guaranteed of playing Michigan after the Michigan game, playing them again for the Big Ten championship. Just curious how you think that changes the vibe around that game. Are you okay with this new setup in the Big Ten, even though it's going to come with something that maybe compromises what you get out of that game?
I remember initially thinking that very thing, but until you just said that, hadn't given it much thought recently. But it certainly does make you think for a second. I can't tell you I'm in a place to be focusing on anything other than trying to beat Maryland and going after those guys. But that'll be very unique for sure. I guess more like an NFL situation where you may have to play a team multiple times, and that would kind of affect maybe your game planning. But we'll worry about that when we get down the road.
Fourth row middle, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Huddle.
Ryan, the NFLPA, I don't know if you saw this, came out and asked to have an immediate ban and removal of all slip film turfs in the NFL, which is the same kind of turf here at Ohio State. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that, if you had heard about that.
Split turn, I don't even know what that
Well,
is.
the type of turf that Ohio State uses due to a higher number of injuries. I guess the NFLPA wants that stuff removed, and I just wondered if you had heard about that. Or
No, it's the first I've heard of any of that, yeah.
I can say, Tony, if you don't mind me interrupting there, that we've had some discussions, some of the administrators have here. I know the NFL is not mandating that these stadiums remove their fields. We test our fields twice a year annually. We'll continue to do that. But there has been some discussions about the topic that you're discussing. Yeah. All righty. Front row right. Austin Ward, Rivals 97.1.
Got short yardage.
There's your excuse. Ryan, on Saturday alone, you had the magic with Cam Brown came back for another year and more injuries and made a couple big plays. You had a former walk-on run for a 70-yard touchdown. From the outside, those look like things that validate the strength of your culture. They're also different kind of stories that maybe we were focusing on a year ago. How different does it feel this year to be in it compared to a year ago, just by direct comparison?
Yeah, you don't really prepare for a moment like Cam's or for kind of a day like that when you see things like that happen. It's just one of those things where it happened with the Lathan Ransom punt block. You just keep swinging at the rock, and eventually it cracks. And you saw some of that happen on Saturday. These are guys. You take Mitch Rossi, for example. You take Xavier Johnson, Cam Babb. Guys who have overcome a lot of things. And you can see when Cam Brown is healthy what he can do. And I mean, if we're going to get to where we need to go, he's going to have to be a major contributor. Talked to him about that last week. Talked to our guys about that. And that's part of this process. You think about where Cade was at, where Tommy was at. I mean, double hip labrum surgery as a freshman. I mean, there's so many things that come with it, and you overcome them and you get stronger. And that's life. And I mean, that's one of the reasons. One of the major reasons that I got into coaching was to watch and help people overcome adversity, because that's what life is. Adversity is coming around the corner every single day, and how you handle it as a person kind of defines who you are. And to see some of these guys learn that process and not just say, well, I want to go transfer. Xavier Johnson could have probably gone a lot of places and played a lot of football, but here he is as a Buckeye making an impact on a team that wants to go, chase some unbelievable goals. Cam Babb, what he's been through. And for Cam Brown too, I mean, what an opportunity he has now to write a story here down the stretch for himself. And you don't always recognize the opportunity that you have. And so we try hard to help our guys realize the opportunity is right here. Because once it's gone, it's gone. You don't have this opportunity ever again. You look back the rest of your life. You have the rest of your life to go do other things. All of our energy right now needs to be focused on this team and where we're going. But I think there's been a lot of work done in the off season with Mick and the staff and our leaders to build that resilience and perseverance that you're talking about.
You're at the top, but you're just one person. Did you think that you needed to do anything differently to get that? You and Mick had conversations, I know, about leadership groups and all that. I mean, how much did you think, if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, then everyone will get on board, or how much do I need to change from one year to the next?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. You look at, you evaluate everything, and you try to figure out, how to improve it. Some things you need to change, other things you don't need to change. Some guys just need more experience, other things you do need to change. So we did. We altered some things in the off season, like you said, with the leadership groups that I thought was huge. But also, sticking with what you believe in too, and having conviction in what the culture is all about, and having conviction in the people that you bring into the program, because we have recruited great people into this program, staff, coaches, and people and players. And when you have great people in the program, I mean, it's been said here a long time, you win with people, then you believe in them, then you trust it, then you just keep working forward, and you put your faith in people. So that's been the focus. Now we'll see if we can reach our goals.
Front row, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, the moment that Cam Babb had was special, but what do you see moving forward? I guess the role he can have for you guys now that he's back, just as far as being that rotation and being a contributor week in and week out?
We'll see what he'll be able to do physically on a regular basis, and if he can take on more, then absolutely we'll give it to him. We'll just have to see how much his body will be willing to actually take on.
Do you have any sense on what he could take?
I actually don't. Physically? No, I actually don't. Yeah. I know that the setback in the preseason did set him back some, so. We'll see how much he'll be able to take on moving forward. I hope it'll be a lot, but I just don't know.
If he is able to kind of withstand the workload, what are his best traits as a receiver from the time you've been able to kind of when he was, I know you guys were high in the spring.
Very conscientious. I mean, very smart, understands the game, strong and powerful, explosive, good hands, runs really excellent routes, very accountable, good quickness in and out of the break. Really good body language. I know CJ really liked throwing at him.
Fourth row left, Jacob Benz, the Lantern.
Yeah, hey Ryan, just going back to some of the Big Ten and things like that, from a recruiting standpoint, after the conference announced the UCLA, USC going to join the conference later on this decade and whatnot, how have you seen maybe the recruiting ramp up in the months since the announcement, or do you see it maybe becoming more of a long-term thing where Big Ten schools become more prominent out there on the West Coast?
I think it's probably more of a long term. You'll see it over time. I don't think it was immediate, although we are recruiting guys from the West Coast. We have been, and there's been a lot of excitement about Ohio State. and the fact that now there's 2 teams from LA coming to the Big Ten. So that's been good, and I think it'll be positive because now we're a nationwide conference.
Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
I hate to ask you about your least favorite topic, but you said after the game that you're optimistic that DeWand and Denzel will be able to play, and you expressed optimism about the running backs. Where does that stand right now?
Yeah, same. I feel the same way. We'll see as we get through the week. I think some guys will be on a pitch count. Some guys will have to see how practice goes today. But a lot of the stuff that we heard today and this morning was promising.
Okay. About the 2018 game, one of the most pivotal plays in that game was you ordering a pass to Rashad Berry, which is a converted defensive end.
How about that?
On 4th and 1. You don't convert it, you lose. How much have you thought about that play? And if it hadn't worked, who knows?
That was a moment where you called the best play you thought gave us a chance to win the game, and at that moment, that was it. And then I think after the game, I remember being with Coach Meyer, and he said to me, "You realize you called the pass on 4th and 1 to Rashad Berry, and if he doesn't catch that, then our season's a lot different." And you just one of those things, you just call it. The decision's been made. You make the decision usually in a moment like that. In a meeting room on a Wednesday, and you just call it, and you trust in your execution. But I had forgotten about that play until you just mentioned it.
And final questions, front row right, Tim May, Letterman row, on 3.
Thank you, Jerry. Ryan, right now in the season, all these questions, whatever, especially about personnel, do you feel like you're driving a car where like pieces are flying off and a tire's going flat, and yet you're picking up speed? You understand what I'm saying? I would think the pressure. What is it like to be in that moment where you're trying to get a handle on going to Maryland? You don't know really who's going to be available. How does that just impact like planning and everything else? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. No, it's I guess it's part of being a college football coach right now. There's a lot of changes that go on, and you try to do the best you can to prepare for being in November in the Big Ten. This is just what we're dealing with. There's a lot of variables that come into play. And the only way to do that is to build a tremendous amount of depth. And that's where, I think back on the preseason when we're going through each position and, guys are asking questions about each position group, and it's like, well, who's going to get on the field? They're all going to get on the field. It's just the way it usually works. And it's rare that a position would just play one guy the whole year, just because it's such a long season, 9 conference games plus Notre Dame. So it's just something you plan for and try to have contingency plans in place.
And contingency-wise, could you see going into Saturday with Dallin Hayden being, in essence, a starter based on right now, and would Xavier be the backup? You know what I'm saying? Or do you think Chip can come back? Can you live with that, I guess?
Yeah, we have to. We don't have a choice. That being said, we feel like we have a really good chance to get, all those guys back for next week. Now, maybe one of them won't, but I'd be shocked if all 3, Chip, Mayan, and Trey would not be available. I think we'll get, hopefully at least 2 of them back and go from there. But I just don't know right now.
Is Thursday that magic day, though, when you find
Yeah, kind of. You get about 48 hours out, you got a pretty good feel.
And last question, what are y'all doing right now offensively that you really like? Obviously throwing the ball, you're almost incomparable in that aspect. But what is it about this offense that just gets you going? Over 600 yards on Saturday, and all those problems I just mentioned, you dealt with.
Yeah, I think it's probably the balance that we have that, we worked hard on, is that, we have multiple personnel groupings. We have multiple ways to attack you in those groupings, vertically, horizontally. You heard me talk about those types of things. And when you can do that and you feel like you have weapons on the outside and they're in one-on-one situations, you got a great chance to be explosive. The minute they have to go double them or help them, then that opens up the run game. And so when you find that balance, I think that's where we're at our strength. And I feel like we've worked hard on having that balance.
Was it the Mitch Rossi play on that 4th and 1 that left you with that sour taste in your mouth?
Yeah, I think both of those plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, both of those plays. We didn't get the cutoff on the backside, and if we do, we actually hit it out the front door. It was a walk-in for a touchdown, but we didn't. So, and that's what it comes down to: competitive excellence.
Coach, thank you very
much. All right,
much.
thanks, guys.
Thanks,